Closed airports, inaccessible bank accounts, and hospitals that were only delivering emergency care that did not require any computers. And of course, 2 Formula 1 teams that were racing against the clock to be ready in time for the Grand Prix, not to deliver the best car, but to recover from their CrowdStrike outage in their Windows systems. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and from the headquarters of Outage, we bring you Threat Talks. And the subject of today is the deep dive of CrowdStrike auto-update disaster. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce briefly our 2 guests of today. Rob Maas, he's the field CTO of Outage, and Jeroen Scheerder, he is a security specialist at Outage. And gentlemen, we're going to talk about the CrowdStrike bug that happened a couple of months before. There's been said a lot about it already, so we'll briefly talk about what happened actually. But then we'll focus on what we can do to prevent this and what maybe better practices are. But let's start with what happened. Rob, could you explain a little bit what hit us?
Yeah, so I think everyone noticed it at least a bit. I was on a vacation and I even heard about this incident because it was really having a big impact. And what happened, so as a result of the incident, and I will come to what happened exactly, is that 8.5 million computers were unbootable, so unusable, which had, of course, a quite impact, as you said in the introduction. And that was done because CrowdStrike was pulling an update from the internet to all these computers. And that update causes the computers to crash, Windows computers in this case. They came up with a blue screen of that. And then when they were rebooted, then the new update was immediately loaded. So it crashes again and basically got stuck in a loop. So the remediation was also very hard. That's also why it took quite some time for companies to recover from this, because even CrowdStrike had the remediation details ready in just an hour or so after the incident happened. It still took some companies multiple days to recover from it.
Yeah, because you need to go physically, or if you have, or at the console of the machine.
It took a while before they figured out how can we do this remotely. In the end, there were some options, but still very, very difficult. But the first few days, it was really manual, going to the computer, type in, using a boot disk to boot the computer, remove the file, and then go back in normal.
And you mentioned CrowdStrike. An update of CrowdStrike, what does that do?
Yeah, so CrowdStrike is an EDR solution, and there's an endpoint detection and remediation tooling. It's kind of a successor to antivirus, which most of the listeners will know. So it will check if there's any abnormal activity on the system, and then will block the process or will alert people, hey, this is what I see here is not normal. Please act upon it.
A security product.
It's a security product, yeah.
And it was a content update, huh?
Yeah, it was kind of a content update, so it improves the product in itself, and it was based upon a specific feature of the product that was watching the memory usage of the system.
In the kernel. And when things are going, well, the topic is becoming the kernel, then I usually talk to Jeroen, because he didn't write it necessarily himself, but he could. Jeroen, a content update that affects the kernel.
Yeah, that's kind of strange, isn't it? But in this case, of course, we have a paradoxical situation. You want a system to have deep measures and safeguards against processes interfering with one another, and the process is messing about with the internal bookkeepings in the software running the system itself. But this is a security product that actually seeks to survey and supervise things other processes do, which is so that's a paradoxical goal. It does something you would not want on your system, but it does it with nominally good intentions. So to get that done, it has to get its hooks into the system at a level which introduces danger, because it's not just a detection mechanism, right? It does not just observe, it actually has facilities to respond, which of course means to change the system behavior, to abort
on the lowest level, at the kernel level.
Yes,
I mean the kernel is supposed to keep separation between processes.
assume that something malicious is happening on the computer. So you're watching a program do something that you don't want to. You cannot assume that the program will willingly cooperate. So you need to undercut it at a lower level, which in the end is, of course, the system level, which is the lowest level you can get. So in this case, a security product injects code in different facilities of the running system. So the inter-process communication stuff, the memory management stuff, the task management stuff, and the communication stuff, and I think the process execution facilities. I think these are the basic areas of the system that this type of software tends to muck about with.
Is this common in security products and EDR solutions? I mean, do they all need to do this? Let's first focus on Microsoft.
Need is a big word. In my view, they shouldn't need to, but
meaning the kernel should be that robust that stuff like this software should be better.
Yes. And the actual type of things that this add-on software does, I think also to a large extent is functionality that probably should have been part of the system already. So if you look at the memory protections, for example, I think the system should safeguard the kind of abusive behavior that this EDR project is adding protection for.
Yeah, so in short, CrowdStrike is making a feature that should be part of Windows kernel. But we're more or less saying that.
I think the system should not be that fragile that it would need such an add-on. Yes.
Now, maybe it's nice to add to this. So we're focusing on Microsoft, all the other players as well. So all the other vendors have the same problem. So that might be good to add to it. But if you look, for example, to Linux, where we also want to check if processes are doing what they're supposed to do, then we have a kind of a solution there that's called eBPF. Which is you can see it as a plugin on the kernel. So your antivirus products will still run in user space. So your kernel is responsible for all the operational tasks with the memory, the CPU scheduling, etc. And then you have the user space where your programs normally run. And in this case, you can run programs in user space and then use this eBPF plugin to say to the kernel, I want to see all the process calls. I want to see all the network things that are going on, give them to me, and then do you the scanning in the user space. That means that the EDR solution in this case is less intertwined with the kernel. So an update that is a faulty update on the EDR solution will make the program crash, but not the kernel crash. So that's less.
Yeah. So instead of patching, not really patching, I understand that, but changing the behavior of the kernel itself, you communicate through well-defined APIs very thoroughly with the kernel, so you get the same visibility and probably also the same control. Instead of being the memory manager or patching it a little bit, you're telling the memory manager, hey, give me a hook every time a process starts. And
that's more or less what happens.
Kill this process. Right?
Yeah. And then for killing, indeed, of course, you still need permissions, because you cannot simply say as a user space agent, I want to kill another program. But you're not in the kernel doing that.
Well, killing a process, of course, is not a granular method. But visibility is very granular. Yep. So operating systems, I think it's been in the Unix family, it's been bread and butter to have instrumentability and process traceability at the full level. So I think, for example, dtrace is part of many Unix and Unix-like systems, and it's been with us for 20 or 30 years now.
Yeah, and that also works by a user space program.
User space program, and it uses facilities actually implemented at the kernel level, which makes it possible to follow what processes are doing without actually injecting code in the kernel.
Yeah, and if your code that you write is wrong in any way, I mean that's not intended, of course. I mean nobody wanted this, so it's not like someone was really stupid or anything. Well, we can talk a little bit about quality control, but that's these things happen, right? And then if your tool, your dtrace tool, crashes for somehow, that's not. Then you lose your detection. Then the system still runs.
You have no visibility if you mess that up. Yes.
Yeah. So can we take one step back, because we're talking here about a content update. That's what strikes me so much here. This is a content update and that changes code in the kernel. I mean, to me, that sounds like a firmware upgrade or in an appliance.
It does not actually change
like
code in the kernel. It injects code into the kernel. That's a different thing.
Yeah, I get that. But I mean, the behavior of the kernel is different. The program, the machine code that runs is different, right? With kernel permissions.
Oh yes, and maybe I think I have a question, because one of the things that actually did surprise me is that there's this thing called safe mode. My Mac also has it. I can disable the kernel from loading any extension when I boot. That means, of course, that I will lose the functionality that system extensions add, but it will boot, regardless of how corrupt these extensions are. But in this case, somehow, this so-called safe mechanism did not prevent from this.
Now, numerous people reported that safe mode was not an option, and they really have to put in a bootable USB stick or CD-ROM or Pixie boot to boot the system, and then get to the hard disk basically and remove the file, because safe boot gave the same results. So probably there's really something injected into the kernel that's even loaded when you go to the safe mode.
So much for safe mode then.
Yeah.
We'll probably have a safe mode 2 later then, or even safer mode.
Even safer mode.
Yeah. Okay. So, but this is content update. So we have many products have different things. So if I'm going to a new major version of my EDR solution, I'm going to test this thoroughly with all my software, because I know stuff breaks, because the EDR software is really intense sometimes. But there's also firewalls have content updates for application identification, for example, or virus definitions, or all those. So what is this something that we have to do? Do those types of content updates need to be like this, or should this this kind of stuff be in the next release of software? So but the thing is, most companies have a difference in software lifecycle for versions of software versus content updates, because content updates you should do quickly, right?
Yeah. So I think let's first take it one step back. The reason that this impact was so big was that they pushed out this content update to everyone at the same time, and there was no way to not update. So everyone got it at the same time. That's also why all these computers at the same time more or less went down. So I think that was a mistake. That's also something they have been working on, and they have fixed that. In general, I think for security updates, you want to be quickly updated, because it is a security product that should prevent
somewhat dynamic. I mean, DNS products, DNS security are dynamic lookups in a cloud service.
But that's less
because you need to be quick in those.
You want to be quick, especially when it comes to security. What you can see in a lot of other security products is that even with new signatures, threat updates, etc., that you can set a threshold. So you can say, okay, I want those updates quickly, but let's wait for 6 hours after the release, if it is not being pulled back already, just to prevent some false positives that might be in these updates.
Then you use the rest of the world to beta test.
Yeah, and also in some environments you maybe want to have the updates immediately because you really want security top notch, and other parts of the organization might be critical and should have a really high uptime, and you want to delay the updates, or maybe don't do security at all and just make a different architectural approach. But it's a whole different discussion. Yeah.
I think I understand this trade-off, of course, applying immediate security updates. In the early stages of an outbreak of a serious event, of course, is important. Criticality and availability system, of course, is also important. And large companies tend to have DTAP environments for their critical parts of their infrastructure. Would that have helped? For example, if this would have been possible to fit such a security update through the stages of the test acceptance before they went to production?
Yeah, well, in this case, not, because there was no way of scheduling which system's getting the updates or when they get the updates. But in general, you can say, okay, I have my DTAP environment, and these.
This is a good requirement if you buy security products. There needs to be a way to stagger updates.
Yeah,
right?
but also another important fact here is you can have DTAP environments, but to test things thoroughly, it needs time. You can have an update. In this case, it was really clear, okay, your system goes down, so it's really black and white. But you can also have updates that make your program a little bit slower or have less impact, but still are impact when you push them to production.
Yeah, yes, of course. But instant death detection is, of course, is a reasonable thing to have, right?
Yeah, that's a good one to have, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but our best practices especially in large organizations, is never to update even the content updates immediately. It's
always threshold. Yeah.
But you're saying in this case there was no way to schedule or stagger or delay updates. No. So actually having this product runs counter to having a DTAP.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
So one of the remediations they came up with after, so it's not really a remediation or more an improvement on their processes.
Design
feature request.
They improved their Q&A setup because that's where it initially went wrong. So the update went through their Q&A, and the Q&A said everything is fine, just publish it. They also are now rolling out the updates in certain steps. So not all customers at once, but just a set of customers and then the next set of customers and the next set. So
but I want to be able to control this as a customer. I think it should be a requirement from that you can first put a few users in, for example, or the sysadmins first.
Yes, for example. Yeah. So
responsibilities are there are distinctive responsibilities here, right? So the vendor, of course, has to offer working software, and I think we're as an industry we're weak in this. We are not holding our vendors' feet to the fire there. They get away with delivering sub-quality stuff.
Yeah, not just the cyber vendors, all software.
The nice thing here maybe is to add to that is that, for example, if you look at games nowadays, you get, because games are really easy to update over the internet, you get now quite often if you purchase a game that's just early beta. And then you're waiting for the updates in the game to become better, and that's more of common practice nowadays than instead of delivering a good complete game that is more or less really version 1 without any bugs. And the reason for that is mainly too tight deadlines. And then they say the deadline is more important because everything is tied to it than a good game in the end.
Yes, and the update cycles are of course forced. Yep. And that has to do with complex regulations, for example, marketing and regulation. But there's also this thing in which people tend to think that, for example, having updates somehow influences stock value. So you have a planned date by which a certain software needs to be delivered, and it will be delivered, ready or not.
Yeah.
So these are complex things, but responsibilities differ. So the vendor has a responsibility in delivering software. There are external things like regulations that push them onto a timeline. There's a marketing drive to aggressive marketing and having enriched feature sets early available on the timeline. And this sort of conflicts with having good software delivered in that same timeline. Mm-hmm. But there's also the consumers, the companies using the software responsibility and actually testing, and they know this, right? So large companies do use DTAP, and of course, and I would say if you use DTAP, then procure software that actually enables DTAP.
Yeah, exactly. So it must be a feature. I'm not sure if it is already with CrowdStrike, but I think indeed every security vendor should implement this.
Also for content updates.
So for content
updates. In your requirements document, you should probably state, listen, both firmware updates and content updates need to be we need to be able to put them to roll them out in phases, and we need to control ourselves. And most products have this, and it's just striking that this one changes the kernel and it didn't have that feature.
Yeah. So if you're a bank, you cannot just point to CrowdStrike and say you delivered a faulty update. We as consumers should also say you put software in production that you did not run through acceptance.
Yeah. Okay. Let's be honest. These things you mentioned quality control. But this will happen again, I guess.
We have seen it before. We've seen it then lately with CrowdStrike, and probably it will happen again within
software
months,
is just
weeks,
too complex to always go right. So we will have a new CrowdStrike incident.
Yeah,
probably. And the question is, how do we prepare for this? And what I think I hear you say is make sure that you think about content updates and not just the new version of the software, but also the content updates.
Yeah, so in general, I think all updates should be tested. So in this case, it's really something that's in the kernel, but it can also be on the user agent itself if it crashes or uses a lot of CPU or whatever. So it should always be tested, and you should always be in control to test it and see if you will accept it and then put it in production.
There is an interesting movement, and I think this has to do with regulation and policies, in which we are entitled to expect more from vendors, to actually take responsibility for the consequences of malfunctionings in the software that they deliver. And I think that, of course, is a complex issue, but I think we do need a push in software quality control.
Yeah, it would have been great if we made EULAs illegal years ago. So the creator of the software is still responsible for the safety of it, like a car. I mean, if I buy a car and it crashes because of manufacturing issues, we hold the car company responsible. We don't do this with software.
The EULAs, whether they're legal or not, is of course...
what I mean is it's provided as is, so there's no responsibility to the vendor.
Yes. And these license agreements, they tell you that you should not use the software for anything. Any circumstance.
And we still do. So it's still our fault then.
No
alternative.
I think such licensing agreements are actually not legal, because you can have a reasonable expectancy of a product or service that you buy to have to function within reasonable parameters. And reasonable parameters for me is that you have a computer and you run a program on it, and that program may crash, and it should not affect my entire system. I think that's as of let's say 30 years or so. That's a reasonable expectation.
Great. Well, that's not something we can do tomorrow. But what we can do, and what I will do, is we'll start an analysis of all the security updates and all the software that we have in our company, and see whether we have staggered updates properly configured. That's all it is. So I hope you join me tomorrow in starting this kind of process. Thank you very much for tuning into Threat Talks. From OnToIt headquarters here, I say goodbye to you. If you liked what you saw today and you don't want to miss any episode of Threat Talks, please like our channel, subscribe to it. Next Tuesday, there will be another one. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by OnToIt Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.